تسليما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خير الأنام نبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين، والبراءة من أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين وما بعد يوم الدين. اللهم انطقني بالهدى والهمني التقوى ووفقني للتي هي أزكى. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم، وافتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Respected brothers, respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His holy book in Surah Al-Balad, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. We have created man in kabad. Kabad is usually translated to difficulty, usually translated to hardship. This holy verse in Surah Al-Balad reminds us of a very important feature to this temporal life, and that is a life filled with challenges and hardship. It reminds us that life is not a resort. Life is not the abode of tranquility and the everlasting happiness and joy. Rather, it is a transient stage that we go through to develop, to reach our potential, to reach our desired perfection. And the real tranquility awaits us in the hereafter, in our eternal abode. In this lecture, I'd like to analyze how people deal with hardships and challenges. And we can say that there are three types of people overall, and three approaches to dealing with hardship and challenge in life. This includes the problems that we go through. This includes the struggles that we have to endure, the hardships, and many other things. The first of the approaches that many people take is despair. This is where they say, you know what, I can't take this. These challenges are too much. I am not going to resist hardship. Rather, I'll let hardship overtake me. And this usually leads to serious repercussions. And it can go all the way to committing suicide, God forbid. Why? Because when a person loses hope in life, loses hope in all kinds of positivity, and resorts to despair, they would have no more tolerance to the hardship that they are going through. They will give up and surrender and result in a very unpleasant situation. They may develop severe depression. They may develop other mental illnesses. And again, God forbid, it would lead in many cases to suicide. So the first approach is absolutely condemned by Islam. The first approach is absolutely unwise, irrational, and is not in line with the purpose of life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in many verses that challenges are part of life, and when they come, we have to understand and keep in our minds and hearts that our Creator, the same way He created us, and the same way He gave us sustenance, and the same way He allowed us to exist, He will also assist us in the face of hardship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Indeed, ease accompanies hardship. Indeed, ease accompanies hardship. You find here there's repetition. And repetition is not in vain in the Holy Quran. It has a purpose. This is to stress the fact in reality that there is always ease with difficulty. See, if you pay attention, the verse doesn't say فَإِنَّ بَعْدَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. There is, after hardship, there is ease. It doesn't say that. It says ma'a. Ma'a in Arabic means with. With. This shows and illustrates how close relief is to hardship. Almost they're inseparable. Although you are in hardship, but knowing that Allah is with you, in and of itself is relief. You feel the relief just by thinking that I am in a hardship, but God is with me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says in another verse, وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Do not despair of Allah's mercy. Do not. This is nahi. In fact, it is one of the gravest sins to have despair from the mercy of Allah. Do not lose hope in Allah. Indeed, one who despairs of Allah's mercy is none but the faithless. So the first approach to dealing with challenges, dealing with hardships, dealing with struggles is to give up and despair, and that is absolutely condemned and absolutely against the morals and teachings of Islam. The second is a little bit less intense, but it is also condemned, and it is to complain and criticize. It is when a person exerts all their efforts and energy in talking about the problem and criticizing the reality and dispraising and bashing the negative reality around them, as opposed to trying to fix it. One would exert so much effort in talking about and criticizing a specific issue or a problem, but they're not willing to do 10th of that energy or spend 10th of that energy in trying to find a solution to the problem. One day there was a very wealthy man in a village who was wise. Along with his wealth, he was a wise person. And he kept on seeing that the people of his village are more of the second type. They're complainers. They don't like anything. They're not happy with the roads. They're not happy with the crops. They're not happy with their leadership. They're not happy with the weather. They're not happy with anything. And the problem is, all they do is sit and complain. They never try to fix and change their reality. Because sometimes reality can be changed. Yes, there are certain cases where you cannot change the reality, but there are cases where you can do something about it. So one day he decided to do this social experiment. He brought a huge rock and placed it on the middle of the main road that they all take. But under it he placed an envelope that is filled with a lot of money, such that when a person takes this money, they become very wealthy. And he wanted to observe from far away the reaction of the people. The first person came and he started to use vulgar language. Who placed this rock here? You know, may God curse them, may this, may that. And then he left. The second person came and says, what is this? We have to wake up in the morning to find this rock on the road. Upon, in addition to all of our problems, now we have to worry about this rock that's impeding our traffic. And goes. The third person comes and begins to say, where is the, authorities? Why are they not doing their job? Who brought this rock? And why is this rock here? And like this, many other people started to come and complain. Then there's young man who was walking, looked like a hard worker. He saw it. He did not say a word. All he did is he brought his energy and his strength to move this rock. Kept on pushing and pushing and pushing until he moved it out of the way. But he realized there's an envelope. He says, oh, perhaps somebody dropped this envelope. So this wealthy man that placed the envelope rushed towards him, thanked him for removing the rock, and said to him, this is not lost money, this is for you. I have put this here for whoever lifts the rock, and you're the one that lifted it. This is for you. He called the people of the village, and he said to them, when you were coming, all you were doing is complaining and bashing the rock and the one who placed the rock. But none of you have thought of what this young man had thought of. Why should we just talk about the rock being there and complain? Instead, move the rock. And moving the rock resulted in this very big compensation to this young man. Oftentimes, in our problems in life, we seem to be, and I say we as in humankind in general, but not every single person, of course. We said there are 3 categories of people. This category, the second category, they're known to complain about their problems more than trying to find solutions to their problems, more than trying to fix their problems. The third approach, which is the approach that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instructed us and advised us to take, the approach that our Imam alayhi salam have advised us to adopt in our lives when dealing with challenges, is to seek a positive solution. But how do we seek a positive solution? There are multiple steps, and there's a process to fixing a problem. Islam doesn't just say, go and fix the problem. No, there's a process. There's a way to go about dealing with challenges, with difficulties, with problems, whether they are problems on an individual level or problems on a community level. There is a way to deal with it. And here I'm going to mention 4 major steps. Step number 1 is to have absolute reliance and tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To acknowledge that you need the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to overcome this challenge and difficulty and find the solution. That is number 1. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. One who relies on Allah, Allah shall suffice him. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ. One who is pious of Allah, يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. He will find a way out for him. This is the first one, the first step. The second step is to begin brainstorming ideas, also known in Islam as the concept of tafakkur, at-tafkir. Our mind is there for a reason. We have to use it to think, and not just think about the problem or think of the solution, but try to brainstorm many possible options and solutions and ways out. In fact, go further and try to dissect and analyze the causes that led to the problem. Because sometimes all you have to do is fix the cause, as opposed to trying to find the cure. You need to find what caused this problem so that you can eliminate the cause. So this is where a person would have to sit and brainstorm and think, why is this problem here? What are the options available to fix this problem or to find a solution? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has encouraged in the Quran, in many verses, the practice of tafakkur. أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Tafakkur is not just to reflect and ponder in the universe, but also to think. To think about our challenges, our difficulties, to think of how we can develop our lives, how we can reach a good level and a good rank of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how we can achieve our desired goals in this life. The commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib, as reported by Ghur al-Hikam, says, بِالْفِكْرِ تَنْجَلِي غَيَاهِبِ الْأُمُورِ. He says, through contemplation, the ambiguity of matters become clarified. The more you think about the matter, the more you start to see lights. You're thinking of this issue, what could be a way to get out of it. The more you think, the more you'll start to see solutions come out. But sometimes this is not to be done alone. Hence we go to the third step, and that is to consult those who know. To consult wise, in other words, to make use of other people's minds. Instead of one mind working to find a solution, you have multiple minds working at the same time to find a solution. You have minds that also have the expertise, especially if the problem is a problem that requires an expert in its nature. And this is where also in Ghur al-Hikam, the commander of the faithful is reported to have says, شَاوِرْ قَبْلَ أَن تَعْزِمْ وَفَكِّرْ قَبْلَ أَن تُقْدِمْ. He says, consult before you decide and think before you proceed. It is very important. Consultation in Islam is extremely important, especially in serious matters. Oftentimes, when a person wants to resolve an issue or deal with an issue, when they think that they are the only person that can find the solution, they will end up misleading themselves. Why? Because usually, as humans, our decisions are tainted with ego. They're tainted with desire. But when we consult someone else, that someone else does not have the same desire we have towards that specific matter. Hence, they'll give us a perspective that is more objective than our perspective. Because our perspective is most likely going to be very subjective and led by emotions and desires and other motives. Consult before you decide and think before you proceed. The fourth and the last of these steps, which is very important, is to have a structured plan. It is not enough just to think about the solutions, but now when I come to execute the solution, execute the way out of the problem, I need to have a structured plan. Doing things in a chaotic fashion could ruin a person's intended plan, and they will not reach their purpose. The commander of the faithful, peace and blessings be upon him, on his deathbed, as he's given farewell to his children and his loved ones, he was saying, أُوصِيكُمَا وَجَمِيعَ وَلْدِي وَمَنْ بَلَغَهُ كِتَابِي هَذَا. I remind you, I advise you, all of you, Hassan, Hussein, alayhi salam, my children, and whoever receives this letter and this book and this advice, بِتَقْوَى اللَّهِ وَنَظْمِ أَمْرِكُمْ, to be pious of Allah and to manage your affairs. Nazm, to organize your affairs, to make sure your affairs are in order, they are structured. Otherwise, you'll be lost. You can't fix anything. Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. But what if the problem really cannot be resolved? Sometimes you try all means and all methods to overcome an issue, but you can't find a solution. You go to the people that are well aware, people of wisdom, people of knowledge, people of experience, you consult them, but somehow this problem just does not have a solution. Do not assume that every single problem has to be resolved. There are certain problems that people live and die with. They're just not resolved. Yes, you can mitigate the issue, you can lessen the pain, but some problems cannot be resolved. When a person has exhausted all means, then at that point they would have to resort to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and engage in what we call tafweed. وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. I entrust my affair to Allah. Indeed, Allah is seeing of His servants. The prophets, the messengers, the imams, when they realize that their communities, or many of their community members during their time, are just not going to listen and follow, they surrender to Allah and say, La hawla wa la quwwata, we can't do anything. Nuh alayhi salam tried for 950 years, but in the end, he didn't give up, but he entrusted the affair to Allah. Oh Allah, do as you see. For me, I have no more means to do. In fact, he says, رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ دَيَّارًا. Do not leave any one of them. Why? Because there's no hope. We lost hope in them. And this is the case with the rest of the Anbiya, with the Awsiya, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi, our Imam alayhi salam. When they try their best to fix certain problems, they are opposed by so much resistance, such that all the means are exhausted and the problem still remains. As simple as Commander of the Faithful entering Masjid al-Kufa, and some of the Muslimin are engaged in a salah that is known to be a bid'ah salah. In the month of Ramadan, there's a salah that you recite individually. They did it in congregation, and that recommended salah in congregation, they have been told by the Holy Prophet not to do it. But the second caliph says, no, it's a good bid'ah, it's a good innovation. And therefore, when the commander of the faithful reached Khilafah in Kufa, he thought to himself, I need to go and end this. And when he tried to end this, they began protesting. And the Imam could not go any further with them and let them be and let them continue to exercise that which is innovation. Which shows you that there are times when an Imam who's an infallible, a Nabi alaykum salam, a prophet, a messenger, but even though the problem could have a solution, but if part of the solution, which is the acceptance of other, is not there, he will not compel them and force them. You know, oftentimes we have this issue with our children. We want them to be better children. We want to work on, you know, their religiosity, their akhlaq, and their success in this life and in the hereafter. And we try our best. But no matter what you do, sometimes you are resisted with the fact that they are not willing to help themselves. You know, you say, I'm willing to help you only if you're willing to do what? To also help yourself. You cannot help someone who does not want to help themselves. And this was the problem that many of the Anbiya and Awsiya and reformers have dealt with, is that they come to a community with all the means and all the great solutions that are so effective, but people are not willing to take them and receive them. It's like that very intelligent and keen and wise doctor who gives a prescription that if an ill person follows, they indeed will be cured, but the ill person takes the prescription, tears it apart, and throws it in the air. Will that person ever receive cure in this case? No. Whose fault is it? Not the doctor, of course. It is the person who chose not to act according to this prescription. Hence, challenges, most of the time, can be dealt with, can be coped with, if we follow the divine prescription. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. We have about 15 minutes before we conclude, so let's take the opportunity for your questions and answers, inshallah. Brother Adam, you have the microphone.
Yes. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
go ahead. You're welcome.
So one thing I have found when people, especially the elder community, that are suggested in terms of resolving their difficulty, is some recommendations or suggestions that are based on some riwayah that do not have a solid foundation, or they are not like a true truth, right? That is maybe, I believe, is like a more word of mouth, just being like around.
What's an example?
Like writing letters, and throw it in the rivers, or tie knots on the zari, or some of these examples.
So some of these things have been reported, not just word of mouth. There are riwayat that talk about writing. The writing of the letter is a form of supplication, if you want to be more precise. Supplicating does not fix the problem by itself. The problem is we rely on one thing and we forget the rest. الدعاء بلا عمل كالقوس بلا وتر. There's a statement or attributed saying to one of the Ma'sumin. He says dua, supplication, without action is like an arrow, a bow that you can use to throw the arrow in, without the string. How can you throw a bow how can you throw the arrow in that bow without the string? So you need the bow, but you need the string with it so that the arrow can be shot. Now here, when you have a dua, whether it is writing the letter and sending it to the sea according to a riwayah, irrespective of its authenticity, or just sitting and reciting a dua, Ya Allah, help me fix the problem, without taking the initiative in trying to find solutions to the problem, it will not be fixed just like that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to act and not just sit and supplicate. To sit and say, oh Allah, you fix my problems, Allah would come back and respond, then why did I create you to place you on this earth? If every time you have a problem, I will have to do it for you, then what's the point of testing you? It's like saying to your examiner who gave you the test, I really want you to give me all the answers to the test. If you really love me, say, I love you, but the test has a reason, has a purpose. You have to try on your own. I'll help you when you need me to explain some questions, give you maybe some clarifications, but I can't answer on your behalf. There are very few situations where we run out of means and we have no way to find a solution. And in this case, what ends up happening is we resort to a karama from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, somebody, and this happened many times, somebody, let's say, who is blind, or somebody who has a serious chronic illness that they tried all means and it just never been cured. But they go and they resort to Allah through one of the ma'soomeen. They beg, and Allah decides to bestow a special mercy on that person and give them their sight back, for example, as a karama. But these are exceptions. The general rule is, I have to seek the normal means. I become sick, what dua should I recite? Okay, recite the dua, but you still have to go to the physician. I need to have pass on the test and exam so I can succeed in my education. Okay, what dua? There's dua, of course. Recite the dua, but you still have to study for the exam. Recite the dua, but go without studying. Will not guarantee you a A or even a passing grade. So with everything, dua is not alone. It is not that one prescription that is comprehensive. You do it and the result will come. No, dua is part of the prescription, and sometimes it's a supplement to the prescription. The real prescription is, in addition to reliance on Allah, is to act, is to do, is to move. And this is what we are recommended to do to find solutions to our problems and difficulties.
I just want to have like a follow-up.
Sure, please.
For sure, I understand like dua and then like taking the actions. But some of the prescriptions are like actions, like doing this. I don't know, like I don't want to go to a specific example in this argument, right? But rather than like what you just said, I think is a more suitable answer, right? Like you are saying, you have to need tawakkul ala Allah, right? Then make tafakkur and consult with experts, and then make a structured plan, right?
Correct.
These 4 steps like make total sense to me, rather than like just making specific dua, right? Like, you know, well, it's like complementary, right, as you are saying, but I feel like those steps, it make more sense. I found it difficult most of the time that people, like they said, like just make this dua rather than like taking these 4
steps.
major steps.
I'll tell you one thing about us as humans in general. We like shortcuts.
Exactly. So
and this is the reason. When you tell me, for example, what does it take to get a PhD? Well, I have to do good in school, then I have to go to college, and then I get my bachelor's, then I have to go for my master's, do my thesis, whatever. Then I have to go for a PhD study and then do my dissertation, whatever it may be. And in the end, I will get my PhD. And I say, what does this take? They say, well, at least 8 years of studying and hard work, maybe more. I say, but is there a shortcut? If I pay somebody to go and buy it for me, say there is, but it had no use. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have made it like this. You want something? Here you go. Alaykum assalam. But where's the challenge? That is, again, one of the main features of life is to go through challenge. In fact, without challenge, we would never appreciate the accomplishment. Without feeling a little bit of the hunger, you will not appreciate the food that you eat. Imagine you're always full. You won't enjoy food. Imagine you're always quenched. You won't enjoy that water. But right now we're fasting. As soon as you break your fast, you know that sip of water that you take. There's pleasure in that I don't know how we can't describe it. It's just felt. The way you drink water, especially if it's cool water, that just quenches your thirst after a very long day of work. Or the first bite of food that you take that just mitigates and calms down the hunger. Likewise, hardships. Hardships are needed for us to enjoy the comfort. Once we, insha'Allah, make it to paradise, insha'Allah, once we make it to paradise, we will appreciate that Allah has placed us in this dunya, as opposed to if He created us directly in paradise. Why? Because the fact that we had gone through all these hardships, and have achieved so many goals. Once we are there, we're going to say, oh Allah, now we really feel the pleasures even more. Why? Because we have felt the difficulties. We have felt the lowly life. Now we're going to appreciate what you have given us in the afterlife. Think of it like somebody who's born in a very wealthy family, as opposed to someone who's born in a very poor family, but they do so much hard working and they become wealthy. Which one of the two will appreciate the wealth more? The one who was born into a wealthy family with a golden spoon in their mouth, or the one who did everything from start to finish, and they exerted all the efforts, and they were patient, and they went through hardships and struggles to reach that achievement? Of course, that one would feel more appreciation. So likewise, in life, challenges are a must, but we have to deal with them positively, plan accordingly. Of course, with all that, relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But not to only suffice by saying, just give me a dua. It's like saying, I need a dua to better my akhlaq. Akhlaq are not developed just by dua. There's the dua called makarimul akhlaq. But Imam Zayn al-Abidin did not say, when you read this dua, the second day you're going to have akhlaq. No. He said, when you read this dua, focus on these points and principles that teach you how to behave and how to train yourself such that you will have the akhlaq. Because you can give dua makarim al-akhlaq to everyone. The Quran is the word of Allah that can perfect a human being. Well, 1.5 billion Muslims and many more throughout history. Most of them have read the Quran. Can you tell me that anyone who read the whole Quran is now going to be a walking Quran? No. In fact, you find some people that read the Quran but commit heinous crimes, right? Sometimes even in the name of the Quran. So therefore, it is not just reading that is enough. It is actually exercising and practicing what is in it. And even in the dua, it's not merely just talking to Allah. There are always pieces of advice that require action. For example, in dua makarim al-akhlaq, وَانْتَهِي بِنِيَّتِي إِلَىٰ أَحْسَنِ النِّيَّاتِ. Make my intention reach the best of intentions. So I said that and all of a sudden now my intention is pure? No. That is reminded me that you need to work on your intention. وَأَنْ أُعَارِضَ مَنْ اغْتَابَنِي إِلَىٰ حُسْنِ الذِّكْرِ. And that I oppose and respond to the one who has talked bad about me behind my back, and that I talk good about them behind their back. Just because I said this, now this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my nature. Every time someone talks bad behind my back, I go say good stuff behind their back. No, this is going to require struggle. Struggle with the soul, with the nafs, with desires, and a lot of challenge so that I can win the battle. So even du'as are not meant to, make the wish come true, but rather help you find the way to accomplish the goal and make it happen. Santu. Any other questions? Or sisters, if any, or brothers? Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Sayyid.
You're welcome.
For your explanation and the lecture. I would have a follow-up question. I don't know if this is really a right time to answer this question.
No problem. We have time.
Or if you want, or if you kindly want to designate a separate lecture for it.
Sure.
I mean, it's up to you. I'll ask my question anyway. So we are facing with many riwaya. Okay, when we read internet pages, different places, different books, there are many riwaya that we encounter. But as ordinary people who are not educated, like jurists, we cannot make the right judgment which one of those riwayat are sahih and reliable, muwassaq, and which one of them are not. How should we approach these riwayat in general? What should the rule of thumb be?
This is a very good topic actually, and you're right. This I definitely need to have a separate lecture for. But in general, in brief, I'll tell you what I'll speak in this lecture. I'm going to give the outline, or just very brief. Number one, we will have to first identify our major books, because not every book is reliable. That's number one. Number two, we have to identify the different subjects in the riwayat. A riwayah that has a subject that has to do with jurisprudence, this one is not for me and you to deal with. we can't act according to that riwayah. Why? Because that's the job of the jurist. Riwayah that has to do with aqeedah. The criteria of this riwayah is not just to find the riwayah, it is to reach contentment and certainty from a number of riwayat, such as tawatur, for example. Because one riwayah cannot establish your aqeedah. But if it has to do with akhlaq, ulama in general have given us the criterion that says this is where you want to look at the content of the akhlaq riwayah and see if it is in line with our general Quranic principles and standards. That's why one should have general understanding of our values. If this riwayah is consistent, even if it's not authentic, you can still act according to it. So there are different ways by which every subject has a special method of dealing with. And this is where, inshallah, in that separate lecture, good that you gave me the idea, because I definitely need ideas we have a lot of nights to cover. So inshallah, this will be one that I will cover soon. And we will talk about in detail about this as much as, of course, the majlis can absorb. Because sometimes we may find ourselves getting into technicalities that are heavy for some of us, and maybe we may not enjoy them or appreciate them as much. But I'll make it as simple as possible, inshallah, where we understand the sources of hadith, the criteria of dealing with hadith in general, inshallah. Thank you for the question.
Sure.
Thank
you very much.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Brother Ali.
Sayyidina.
Welcome.
So, if you compare the believers and non-believers who want to take that for actions, most of the time non-believers do not take the first action and take the three action like with the consulting. And my question is that what is the role of the tawakkul here?
Tawakkul, role of tawakkul.
Yeah, role of tawakkul
very good.
here.
Role of tawakkul is that it brings out your tawheed. The difference between you as a believer and a non-believer is the fact that you believe in tawheed. Tawakkul is a fruit, a practical fruit of tawheed. Meaning that you believe, because what does tawheed mean? Tawheed has different aspects. Tawheed is not just there's one God. Well, that's a very basic understanding of tawheed. Tawheed is to believe that nothing exists and nothing can move from A to B without the permission and empowerment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah does not give permission and power for anything to be, even that letter that I pronounce, the breath that I take, nothing can move one bit in existence without the power and permission of Allah. So tawakkul means you're reminding yourself all the time of this reality, that no matter what I do, I always need power and permission of Allah. So tawakkul allows you not to rely solely on yourself, because that ends up leading to what? Shirk. Because what's the opposite of tawheed? Shirk. If I said I accomplished this because of my planning and intelligence and hard work, and Allah had nothing to do with it, then I'm saying that the energy that I have, the power that I have, the existence that I have is mine. And God has nothing to do with it. And this is shirk. So to keep tawheed in every action, we need tawakkul. Say tawakkaltu ala Allah. Meaning that I know internally that everything that I do is going to be, insha'Allah, permitted by Allah and empowered by Allah. That's why we say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There's no power and might without the quwwah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is tawakkul. That I rely on you, not on myself. Because myself has no existence and no power and nothing without you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawakkul sometimes is misunderstood. This is where they call it in some riwayat tawakkul. Tawakkul, which means to rely in the sense of saying, I'm not going to do anything. God, you take care of it. I hired you to be my agent. You do everything for me. I'm just going to sleep. This is wrong tawakkul. This is not the right tawakkul. But to believe that I'm going to strive and do everything it takes to reach, but knowing in every step it is only Allah that will empower me and give me the tawfiq, this is the right tawakkul. Ahsantu. 2 minutes. Anybody else? All right. Very good, inshallah. Thank you, everyone. Let's recite the Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha for all marhumeen, especially those mu'mineen who brought the food in the iftar for tonight. And let us remember the Imam of our time. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma kulli waliyika al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.